All right, welcome Roster Wars to the final episode of the United Nations Rookie Summit. I'm your host Corbin, and as always, we've got Ross and Tyler joining as well. Today, we finally get to discuss the running back class. We saved the best for last. I know this is the one you've all been waiting for, and we got a lot to talk about. A little bit bigger group this time because we got a deep class coming in.
Yeah, very excited. Feeling under the weather today, but I couldn't call in sick for this one. It's the most exciting pod we've done, I think. Yeah, I think everyone's excited for the running backs and specifically this class as well. Like you said, it's a deep class, a lot of different body types. So hopefully we'll get into it.
Yeah. Do you have COVID?
No,
Is
I've
it COVID?
checked multiple times. I've checked multiple times. We're good. You can't get it through Zoom either, so I think
Yeah,
we'll
I
be
don't
all
think we're
right.
going to contract it. I don't think we're at risk, Tyler.
I don't
So
think
no need to
there's
worry.
anything I don't think there's any other sickness in the world but COVID. So
Yep, it's
Yeah,
taken over.
exactly.
That's
Yeah,
all you
yeah,
can get.
yeah.
No common cold. It's just COVID now.
all
But
right. I'm
but we got
excited
a
for
lot. Yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
for running backs because I love running backs, as you can tell by the stable of running backs I always have. I'm a running back first type of guy. So
An RB connoisseur.
yeah.
Fuck that zero RB strategy. You need all the running backs. But let's
That's
hop
right.
into it because we got a lot to discuss today. I think we got like five guys. Yeah, five guys we'll be discussing. First, we'll start off with Bijan. Then we've got Jameer Gibbs. We're talking Tank Bigsby, Devon Achane, and Zach Charbonnet. So let's kick it off with the big name in the class. It's Bijan Robinson coming out of Texas, 21 years old, junior. He stands 5'11", 215 pounds. His RAS score was 9.84 out of 10 with a 4.46 40. He has elite explosion, and he did not do any agility testing at the combine. Last year, he had 258 carries for 1,580 yards, 18 touchdowns, 19 catches for 314 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And the year before that, not much of a drop off, 195 carries for 1,127 yards, 11 touchdowns, 26 catches for 295 yards, and 4 touchdowns. So obviously, there's a lot of talk about Bijan coming in, being one of the best prospects that we've had coming out of college since Saquon or Ezekiel Elliott. And I mean, after watching the tape, I mean, he could be the best of the three. I mean, he's a super exciting prospect, and there is a reason why he's going 101 in super flex and just non-super flex leagues. So what do you guys think about Bijan after looking into him a little bit?
Well, he's a grade A character. I mean,
Just a nice guy.
I didn't even write anything down on him because he's just such a excellent prospect. Like he's so good. Like watching the tape, you get kind of like, I don't want to be creepy, so I'll just say mesmerized. But yeah,
You
like
get
he
hard
does
when
it.
you watch him play, don't you?
Oh yeah. Imagine if he went to Detroit. Oh Jesus.
I know.
And yeah, like I haven't felt this way about somebody since my boy Saquon. And
I thought you were going to say your wife, but
I mean, I've said it before, like the whole reason why I was in RR is because I was able to take the 101 to get Saquon. Unfortunately, because of stupid moves, I don't have the 101 to get Bijan. Saquon, Bijan, see how they sound so good? Anyway, yeah. Matt will never trade that 101 to me, so but this guy does everything. He's amazing. I, I kind of love him. So
yeah, you're not the only one.
It's almost boring to talk about him because it's like he's the nailed on 101. He's the best running back in the class. There's nothing much else. Like to me, he's like an unquestioned amazing football player. Like he's got everything you want. Like he's got all the athletic traits that make it look so easy. Like just to talk about his game a bit, like he bounces off tacklers like nothing else, and that's like his most elite trait is his contact balance. And I think that's the number one thing you want from a running back. He's also got like the lateral agility to cut and change direction, and he does it without losing any speed whatsoever. And obviously, he talked about his athletic testing as well. Like he's got the good enough speed. It's not quite 4.3 speed, but it's brilliant. And if he's cutting at that speed, then it's just unstoppable almost. And he's not just like a running back as well. He's like an offensive weapon. So his receiving skill set is the best in the class, and it's the best I've seen in a long time, maybe since Christian McCaffrey. I was quite surprised
Yep.
that he wasn't used as much. Like you said, he had like 19 catches, which is crazy for the skill set that he has. Like he's got the hands and the body control. Like he catches the ball away from his body and like twists and turns in the air and is then ready to like get yards after the catch as well. Like I'd like to see him play receiver for a full game. It'd be quite interesting to see how he does. But yeah, like I said, quite boring. He's just great at everything. And I think he could be like a legit like top 5 running back in the NFL from day one. And like
Mhm.
he's one of the guys that can like command touches. Like there's not many running backs in the league now. Like when we're looking at it for fantasy football, we want guys who can touch the ball like 300 times. There's not many in the league who can do that. And with a guy like Bijan, who's as talented as he is, he's going to demand the ball and like passing and running.
Mhm. Yeah, I
It's
mean,
like, sorry, I just wanted to say,
you're good.
it's like one of the scouting reports I read on one guy, he said he's like a comparison of Barkley, like a combination of Barkley and McCaffrey together. Like just, but he's got size too. Like, yeah, I think that was a good comparison because he's got the receiving skills of McCaffrey and the running ability of Barkley. So put that together and you got them both together.
Yeah. And my thing about
not
it,
saying that McCaffrey's a bad runner, not saying that Barkley's a bad receiver because they both excel at both. But
yeah.
I'm just saying,
Well, the way that things have been trending in fantasy football, you really don't have a ton of those true 3-down backs anymore. You'll have a guy who's, more the pass catcher, the 3rd-down guy, and then you got like the 1st, 2nd-down guy. But Bijan is a true 3-down back. There's a couple of guys in this class that have that potential, but if you're drafting him, he should be getting the entire workload for whatever team he goes on. I mean, I'm saying like, he could be the dynasty RB1 right away his first year. And even in like a startup draft, like I wouldn't be so shocked to see him go 101 overall in a non-super flex league, I guess that is. But I mean, he's about as sure of a thing as that you can get. And it doesn't matter what kind of team you have. I guess I could see you taking a quarterback 101 in a rookie draft. But I mean, you have to be in a complete rebuild and have no quarterbacks and be really confident in whoever you're taking over Bijan. But I mean, he should be going 101 in every single league. I mean, there was one stat that I saw. He had 104 missed tackles last year per Pro Football Focus, and he's the only running back ever to go over 100. So it's just wild. I mean, he's the whole package. He's got speed, power, change of direction, balance, vision. It's all there. And then you talked about his receiving skills too. Great hands, good routes. He's got the run after catch ability as well. So I just struggled to find any weaknesses in his game. And I guess if I had to say something, and this is really nitpicking here, but he could be a little bit more patient at times. You'll see him want to try and hit the hole right away. If, maybe he waited a split second for his blocking to kind of take over, he would have a little bit more of an open hole and some room to work with. So I guess you can say, he tries to do a little bit too much sometimes, but at the same time, a lot of the times it works in his advantage, like he'll try and get a little bit, cute with it. And sometimes that can come back to bite him, but more times than not, it actually works out to his benefit. So like I said, he's about as can't miss of a prospect as you could look for. And I think it's silly to take anyone over him at 101. I mean, like I said, I guess you could try and put a quarterback in there in super flex if you're super confident in CJ Stroud, or if you want to, roll the dice on Anthony Richardson. But if I have the 1-1, doesn't matter where I am, I'm taking Bijan. You could recoup, 2 or 3 first for him anytime you want. And this is a guy who should be a solid contributor for fantasy football for 5 to 7 years. And you just don't see that with running backs in today's fantasy football.
He's 21 years old.
Yeah.
like if you're in a super flex and you have like say, I don't know, Joey Burrow and Trevor Lawrence under contract for a long time, do you really can you really roll with just those two? You need a third quarterback, so you probably should go with a younger Stroud and with 101, and that's the case. But when Wentz is your third quarterback, I mean you need a third. So
hopefully Matty
While
Warbucks is
Matt's
listening to
taking
this.
taking
Yeah.
notes.
Hopefully he tunes in and takes your advice, man, for your sake, because if you got Bijan at 102, that's a steal.
Yeah, I have enough running backs though.
Yeah, but
It's
you don't
like,
got a Bijan.
sorry. Ooh, squirrel.
But yeah, I mean, it's kind of redundant to just keep on going on Bijan. I think that everybody understands that he's the 101. If you've looked into it yourself, or if you're taking, the scout's opinion for it, I mean, he is that can't miss kind of guy. And whoever gets him should have a solid RB1 for the next 5 years at least. He could be, a Pro Bowler right out the gate, if not all pro. I'm super excited to see what he does and where he goes. And the one thing that I didn't really mention too is these, like when we get into rankings, it's kind of tough without knowing the landing spots for running backs, especially because it depends on team schemes and who else is in that running back room and what role they're exactly going to play. With Bijan, you don't have to worry about that. But with every other running back that we talk about here, that landing spot really does matter, because you look at like a Clyde Edwards-Helaire and, he was probably, like the 5th or 6th running back in that class. And then he goes to the Chiefs and then he shoots up to 101, and just throw the rankings out the window. Swift, Dobbins, Taylor, I think they were all in that class. They all get kicked to the 2, 3, 4 running back in that class after that one selection. So with Bijan, I'm not too worried about that. Nobody could surpass him in my eyes. He could go to the worst situation in the NFL, and Jahmyr Gibbs could go to the Dolphins or something like that. Not totally ideal situation. It's not going to change anything for me and how I rank him. He is the best guy in this class, no questions asked. But
Okay.
speaking of Jahmyr Gibbs, let's get into him real quick. He's coming out of Alabama, 21 years old, a junior coming out. He stands 5'9", 199 pounds, so a little bit of the smaller side. His RAS score was 8.06 out of 10. He ran a 4.3640, so blazing speed there. But really poor size. He didn't have a good vertical, and he did not do the broad jump or agility testing. So it's pretty much just his 40 and, size that's considered in that score. So not a lot of testing numbers on him, but he does have that speed, and you can see that on tape too. Last year for Alabama, he had 151 carries, 926 yards, and 7 touchdowns. He also had 44 catches for 444 yards and 3 touchdowns. And he transferred from Georgia to Alabama. So in 2021, he had Georgia Tech rather. He had 143 carries for 746 yards, 4 touchdowns. And he also had 35 catches for 465 yards and 2 touchdowns. So everybody says that Jahmyr Gibbs is kind of in the same tier as Bijan. I don't even have them on the same level. A lot of people say that he should be like a 102 in a non-super flex draft. And I might have some words to say about that. I don't know how I really feel about him. I don't think he's as unanimous as of an RB2 in this class as some people think. What are your thoughts, guys?
Well, I got that. I mean, he's obviously, getting a lot of the Kamara, comparisons, right? Because of his passing game. But it's it's got to be seen if the running game can translate to the NFL. If he can run in the NFL, it's I got a good comparison of Swift, but he'll be more durable than Swift because he's a little more solid. So
he's lighter though.
He's lighter,
Swift's like
but
210.
No, they're just talking about like physique, like you can be more solid and not be,
He's just compact. He's denser.
Yeah, like I don't know. It's like when a skinny guy says, "Look at my abs," and a fat guy says, "Well, I'm stronger than you."
Okay.
The fat's covering the abs. The skinny guy looks more solid, right?
I gotcha. Okay.
So
DeAndre Swift is fat and Gibbs is jacked. Got it.
That's exactly. Basically, he's better shape to handle. Is kind of what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
yeah.
I do like your Swift comparison, but I don't like the Alvin Kamara comp at all. Really, I think that Kamara is a totally different beast. And he's
No,
like,
and that's
what,
what, no, I'm
215,
just saying, that's
220?
what a lot of people are saying. My scout said Swift. The scout that also, said Kincaid was a great blocker, so.
Well, I do like that comparison from him because that's who I kind of comped him to as well. I got a couple other guys in mind as well, but
Yeah. I mean,
so
it's just basically because the running game, like, when you look at college, like, yeah, he's averaging 6 yards a carry, but he's not going to do that in the NFL. And
Mhm.
does his running game translate to the NFL? You know what I mean?
mhm.
Is he going to be a
I'll jump
third?
in here because I think there's been too much Jameer Gibbs slander, and I'm here to carry the flag for Jameer Gibbs. And you
Good.
talk about his yards per carry in the college, and a guy who leads the NFL in all-time yards per carry is my comp for Jameer Gibbs. That's Jamal Charles, and I think Jamal Charles is one of my favorite ever players. Maybe because I had great fantasy success with him, but he's just fun to watch. And I get the same vibe watching Jameer Gibbs. Like he's the way he gets like skinny through holes and like he doesn't his acceleration and his feet are so quick. And like he sidesteps defenders. He does like a little skip move. I don't know how else to describe it. It's exactly the same as Jamal Charles. I had to go and look at highlights, like career highlights of Jamal Charles, just to make sure I wasn't misremembering. And I'm telling you, he's exactly the same player. Charles is like longer and taller and skinnier, but that little quick feet move is exactly the same. But I think there's also a bit of a myth with Gibbs that he's maybe only a pass catcher or he only runs outside the tackles. But I think he does have like a decent amount of power. And like I said, like he's got the vision to set up defenders and he can get through those like small holes. The Alabama offensive line wasn't great at all. And I think he's very quick. To be honest, we're going to talk about Devin Achane later on, but he ran the low 4.3s. I think Gibbs plays faster than him, whether it's the acceleration or just, like you said, he doesn't lose speed when he changes direction. It's I think he plays a lot faster. And I think as a receiver, like he's elite.
Mhm.
He lines up out wide and he can run routes. Like he runs angle routes and he runs wheel routes very well and like crisp. And he's a threat. I think he was Alabama's best pass catcher last year, which says a lot more about the receivers. But Gibbs is so good, and I love watching him play. And the myth about him not running between the tackles, I've got a stat for you. I seen someone on Twitter post this, but he ran between the tackles 189 times. He ran outside the tackles 189 times. Inside the tackles, he had 1,068 yards. Outside the tackles, 1,074 yards. So pretty much identical production inside and outside. And obviously, you're asking if that's going to translate to NFL. I think he does have enough power for it to translate.
Mhm. Well, I do agree with a lot of things that you said there. Like I also did kind of get those Jamal Charles vibes, but there's, that's obviously the ceiling for him. But then there's other guys that you could talk about, like a Kenneth Gainwell or like a Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who were so, known for their pass catching ability coming out of college. And then you just haven't seen that translate to the NFL. And so I used to really put a lot of focus on those pass catching running backs. Because in PPR leagues, you want somebody who can run and catch. If you can get, 15 carries and then 5 to 6 catches every single game, that's the kind of running back that you want on your fantasy team. And I totally get that. But at the same time, well, first, I'll just talk about the good things. He is probably the best pass catching running back in this entire class. He does have that quickness, the speed, the acceleration. He's got the vision to make some good moves. But on the other hand, when you talk about him running between the tackles, he can do it. But every time he does, he always looks to bounce it outside. Even if he gets that first level, he is bouncing it outside. He is not running straight up the middle. And then, if that hole isn't there, he is going to bounce it outside. So, he might have some production there, but the NFL is going to be a whole new beast. And I'm not saying that he can't do it. I'm not trying to poo-poo on your flowers or anything here with him, because I do like him as a prospect. But I'm just saying, when he goes to the NFL, he just hasn't really shown that physicality and that power. And when you mentioned Devon Achane, I think that's a guy who actually does show a bit of power, and you just don't get that from Gibbs. Like he's a guy who's going to win with his speed and his quickness, and it's not coming from his physicality. So for me, I mean, it really just depends on where he goes. Because if he goes to a team like the Dolphins with that zone blocking scheme, love it for the guy. But there's other situations where I just don't know how it's going to pan out for him, because he is going to need a lot of touches in the passing game in order to be fantasy relevant, because I don't see him carrying the ball 20 plus times a game. I think he's going to be like a 10 carry kind of guy, and he's going to have to rely on that receiving game to get those numbers up. It's a lot like Swift, and like injuries have kind of impacted him, but he hasn't been that 20 carry kind of guy. When he has, a big explosive play, it's great, but it could just be a little bit inconsistent and kind of a boomer bust guy week to week. And that's something that does concern me a little bit about him. But again, not the biggest deal. I still like him as a prospect, but I just think there's other guys that are in that tier with him that are pretty comparable. I don't think he's head and shoulders better than some of these other guys we're going to talk about.
I think he's a lot closer to Bijan than he is the third guy for me, and I'm sure we'll get to the rankings later on, even though I've spoiled my top two. But I think even though he's not maybe going to carry the ball 20 times in the NFL, he's going to carry the ball 10 to 15 times. He's going to have a high yards per carry because he's going to rip off big runs. And he does need to be used in the passing game. Like if an NFL team drafts him and doesn't use him in the passing game, that's just malpractice, complete malpractice. Like you're not using your players to the best of their abilities. So I don't really have a concern about him going somewhere and not being used like that. Because I think that's like his elite trait that he's going to carry to the NFL. And you've got to imagine coaches are going to use him that way.
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing is, I just don't think he's going to get a lot of goal line work either. I mean, at 200 pounds, you're going to have another guy on your roster who's 220, and he is going to get those goal line touches. It's a lot like Jamal Williams and DeAndre Swift, and that's going to eat into his fantasy value. I kind of just see him as, more of a third down guy, but he's not like that true 3-down running back. And you still have plenty of value being like that third down back, and getting that 10 to 15 carries. Yeah, exactly. There's tons of value in that. I'm not taking away from him at all. But if you're looking for a guy at like, the second pick in the draft, it really comes down to like Jahmyr Gibbs and Jackson Smith-Njigba. And for me personally, I would take Jackson Smith-Njigba. Obviously, like it depends on your roster construction here, but I don't know. I just don't think that he's going to get the volume that you would see in some of these other guys who have that potential to be a 3-down back.
I'll say I think he might be in the first round. I think he might sneak into the back end of the first round as well. I want to get that prediction out there just before the NFL drafts in a couple of weeks, but I think he might sneak into the back end of the first round, and then we'll see him like as a lock to be like 102 in my mind if he does get that first round draft capital.
Yeah,
the draft capital means
it'd be interesting. The thing is, like, I would like him on a team like the Bills, but they just got James Cook, and I feel like he kind of already has that role established for him, and they're very similar. I would say the Chiefs would be a nice spot with Pacheco as a compliment for him, but then are you really going to want to use that 31st pick when you took Clyde Edwards-Helaire? And I don't know. So it does depend on where he goes. I could see him slipping into the first, but I have him an early second round grade for myself.
Chiefs are probably going O-line anyway. Yeah, I'm going to need you two to quit fighting because you're adding a lot of hostility to this podcast.
Just wait till we get into Devin Achane. Don't worry.
Yeah. Okay.
All
We're
right.
going to shit on Devin Achane. All right. I'm ready. I'm already fueling up. Ready to take you on. Let's talk. Take a little break.
If anybody says on site, it's over. Shut it down.
Yeah,
on site.
It's on site with the shit, Ross. Get ready. We'll take a Tank Bigsby break just to kind of, simmer down a little bit, let tempers kind of flare down. But yeah, we'll talk Tank Bigsby here. Coming out of Auburn, he's 21 years old, junior coming out. He is 6'0", 210 pounds. He got an 8.33 RAS score out of 10. He ran a 4.56 40, pretty average explosion scores, no agility testing, and pretty average size, 6 foot, 210 pounds. I think that's more than adequate for an NFL running back. Statistically, last year, he had 179 carries for Auburn for 970 yards and 10 touchdowns. With that, he had 30 catches for 180 yards, 0 touchdowns receiving. And the year before, 223 carries for 1,099 yards, 10 touchdowns with 21 catches for 184 yards and 0 touchdowns. So different kind of running back than Jahmyr Gibbs for sure. He's more kind of that one-cut power runner. Didn't have very good offensive line play at Auburn, and he's been a guy who's kind of been on the radar in Devy circles for a couple of years now, mostly because of that sick name, Tank Bigsby. But I don't know. I feel like he's kind of fizzled out somewhat. Still a solid prospect, somebody that you want to have on your fantasy team. I don't mind him.
I like Tank as well. He's got like decent size for the position. And like you said, he's been on the radar for a while because he had like a really good true freshman season. He was up there with Bijan in terms of recruiting, and the Devy guys looking at him a few years ago. And he's in a completely different situation. Like you said, the Auburn offense is just horrible. It's just so bad. It let him down a lot. But he still showed a decent amount. So even though he maybe doesn't have the wow box score numbers, like he's still, like you said, a power runner, and he has like the physicality to break through arm tackles without losing balance. And I think he lacks like long speed, but I think he has enough bursts or out his cuts, which allow him to create the space and a little bit of acceleration. And that was shown by his combine numbers. Like his 40-yard wasn't great; it was like 47th percentile, but his 10-yard split was in the 70th percentile. It's not amazing, but it just shows you the difference, and that's where he wins, is like his burst in and out his cuts. And I really like that about him. Like you said, he's a 3-down back, or like he can do everything to be a 3-down back. Like he's a good pass catcher. He had the most receptions at Auburn, and that just shows how bad the offense was if your running back is leading you in receptions. And the other thing to show how bad the Auburn offense was, 76% of his yards were after contact. That's like the highest of the top guys in the class. So he had to create on his own, because everything else was like falling apart around him. And I liked what he showed. And he's, like I said, he's still young because he's broke out as a true freshman. And I think he could be a better NFL back than what we've seen last year, if he has the pieces around him. And obviously this is all landing spot dependent. So hopefully he goes to a good place where he can show his stuff.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got a guy who has decent production with no offensive line play, I think that translates well to the NFL. And he's that guy. There's another guy we're going to talk about later who had fantastic offensive line play with the production to go with it. And I have some questions about that because you don't know what it's going to be like when you go to say a bottom half of the league offensive line. How is that going to impact your game? It's almost always going to be negative. So when you can make something out of nothing, that's something that I really like in my running back prospects coming in. But I mean, I think that he's just a very solid prospect at everything, but he doesn't have really any elite traits that just like pop out. The one thing that I would say is leaning elite is how aggressive of a runner he is. He will find that hole and just hit it hard. He has no problem just running through a motherfucker's face. And I love that in a running back because you will have a role on any NFL team if you run that hard. He might not be the fastest guy in the world. 4.56 40 is more than okay. He's got good acceleration. He's just kind of that one cut and go guy. He will just hit that hole hard as hell every single time. Only one career fumble that I saw in college. But I do have questions about how he will perform in the NFL in the passing game. I mean, sure, he has like 30 catches last year, 21 catches, but I just don't think that's going to be his role for an NFL team. So I see him as more of a 2-down back early on. Maybe he can develop in the passing game, but it just kind of depends on what team he goes to. If you have a guy like, I don't know, say like a Jerick McKinnon or even like a JD McKissick, like those guys are going to cut into your touches just because he can't bring to the table what they can necessarily. Like, sure, he can catch the ball, but he's not like a yards after catch kind of guy. He's more of a, take what you get and run through one guy and then the second tackler will come and take him down. So he's not going to really make guys miss that often. Like I didn't really see a ton of that in college. He's going to more try and run through you as opposed to juke you out. So I do like him as a prospect. It really just is landing spot dependent. And I think that he is going to be a solid contributor for any NFL team that drafts him. Good prospect, just not totally in love with him. For me, I have like Bijan in his own tier. And then I have a group of like 3 guys in tier 2. And then tier 3, he's like right at the top of that list for me, like fringe tier 2. And there's a couple of guys in that third tier for me. So he's one of the better guys that I like out of that group.
Can I speak?
Yeah, go right ahead. Sorry you had to go last this time.
I do not like this guy. I put on the tape. The first thing I noticed before I ever read anybody's scouting report anywhere is that he runs too upright, and I don't like running
Mhm.
backs who run upright. I think
Yeah.
that you can do it in college, but when you get to the NFL level and you're trying to break a tackle or break through a hole, if you're running too upright, you're done. So for that reason, I'm out.
Okay.
I mean, but it's funny though that you said he only had one fumble that you've seen, because I read he had like 4 fumbles in like a 6-game span
Maybe
last
not
year.
lost then. Yeah, I didn't really
Um,
fact check that too much, so take that one with a grain of salt. But maybe it was just like one fumble lost.
like yeah, like I mean he does read the defense and find the holes well. That's a good positive that I think you might have mentioned. He's got the traits like to be a good prospect. I just that upright running gets me. I'm trying to
Yeah,
remember back who it was. There was somebody who was like going to be a great running back. Everybody's like, and I was like thinking, no, this guy runs too upright. And I was reading all this stuff about upright runners, and then the guy just flopped in the NFL. And I was like, I'm going to stick with that my rest of my life because that is true to this day.
yeah. I mean, I agree. He is kind of a little bit of an upright runner, but I don't think that's the biggest deal. I don't think it's a reason to be out on him, because you look at a guy like an Adrian Peterson, like he was an upright runner. Like Le'Veon Bell was kind of like that
Don't
as
you talk
well.
about AP like that. He was not.
He was.
Aaron
Yes, he was.
McFadden.
Absolutely. Yeah, Darren
He,
McFadden. I mean, that's something to,
he can
I
get
mean, more on
down.
Tyler's side of the argument, but
Oh, wait, that's who I was thinking. That's who
So I thought
yes, Darren McFadden. That's the guy.
didn't reach
Yeah.
his
yeah,
full
it's
potential.
not
He still had a good
ideal,
NFL
but
career.
I mean, he was
yeah.
okay, but like, yeah, he wasn't what everybody was like, oh, he's gonna be so good, but he's too upright. Now with AP, like you can be upright, but when you have tree trunk legs to hold your balance, like AP, then it offsets, I guess. He wasn't upright too much. Like he could lower his pads. So
Yeah. I mean, if you would see him, like, it would be a problem if you saw him just going down easy or just getting hit high and just toppled, but he doesn't go down like that. Like, normally
well,
he will truck a guy and then the second guy
don't
comes to
change
clean
in
it
the
up.
NFL. That's what I'm saying. You run upright in the NFL unless you have the power. It's going to change. It's different. It's going to be different in college when you're an upright runner. You need to be able to get down. You need to lower
I
the
just
pad.
don't think
You
it's
need
a
to run
reason to
some
take him
balance.
off your board. I mean, everybody, like,
I have my
oh,
opinion. You have yours.
yes, you do, but I mean, go ahead.
So
Don't
on
draft him
site.
then.
On
And
site.
say, I'll just back the fuck off then. Tyler, you're entitled to your opinion. I respect it, man. That's fine.
Let's
I'll
To
just
put
put
it
a
let
button on it, on the Tank
Oh,
Bigsby usage at the next level, I think he's like a 1A to a 1B. I think would be his ceiling. So I look at Ramondre Stevenson, and he's a guy who has the power and can catch as well. So I think that's Ramondre Stevenson's year this year is like the ceiling. I think that's the best case scenario for him.
Yeah, I like that. Because I mean, if you get into these guys who are like, third round picks in the NFL draft, it's just super dependent on, opportunity. Like look at like a James Robinson, undrafted guy, Travis Etienne goes down, and then all of a sudden he's getting everything for Jacksonville. That's going to happen maybe like once a year. The same thing with the Ravens and like the Falcons too, like with Cordero Patterson. And when J.K. Dobbins went down, like Tyson Williams or whatever that guy name is, like he got some looks. So, I mean, it happens every single year. It just, sometimes it's just luck. And he could absolutely find himself in that situation. I think he's got some traits that I really like. And there's some things where it's like, okay, well, some things are going to have to fall his way in order to get some valuable contributions fantasy wise. But let's take a break with that. We've got 2 more prospects to discuss before we dive into our rankings and sleepers. We've got a special commercial for you, compliments of Tyler. Hope you enjoy.
Well, I'm here in my garage. Got the old helmet on because I just watched Draft Day for like the 1000th time. And I put the helmet on because sometimes you gotta bang your head right Just kidding. Anyway, like I said, I just watched Draft Day for 1,000th time. And I gotta say, Kevin Costner is fantastic. Like, I mean, just the whole movie. But it really gets my blood going, and I really want to make some trades here. I mean, I don't know if RR is listening, but I got the 102, and I'm kind of thinking of trading it because I've had it for over 3 days. I don't know where to go. I don't know what I'm doing with this video. I'm all out of ideas. We're going to talk running backs, or we already started. And I ain't going to get any of these guys because I just want my Bijan. And I'm not going to get them. Oh, well.
All right, welcome back, Roster Wars. Hope you enjoyed that. Tyler's 1,000th time watching Kevin Costner and Draft Day. That's such a bad fucking movie, honestly.
It is a great movie, isn't it?
No, it's not.
I might watch it again after this.
I haven't watched it in years. Maybe I'll give you another try, but I was not impressed the first go around. It's been one and
I'm
done
so
for me.
No matter what.
about
Jameer Gibbs, no matter what.
Yeah.
I'm still on the fence about Jennifer Garner though. Like, is she hot or is she? I don't know.
Yeah, she's hot. Would. That's my answer. Would. WOULD. On site. Anyways, let's get into it because rumor has it this is going to be a heated topic of debate here, and that's De'Von Achane out of Texas A&M. He is 21 years old, junior coming out, standing 5'8", 188 pounds. RAS score 5.73 out of 10, so pretty average score there. But he did run a 4.3 240. Doesn't have very good size, obviously 5'8", 188 pounds, a little bit on the smaller side. And didn't have the best agility or explosion scores either in the combine. But last year, he had 196 carries for 1,102 yards and 8 touchdowns. Along with that, he had 36 catches for 196 yards and 3 touchdowns. And 2021, he had 130 carries for 910 yards and 9 touchdowns. Along with that, 24 catches for 261 yards and 1 touchdown. So Ross and I were talking about it, and I'll just kind of go into my ideas on De'Von Achane here. And I mean, first off, he's just got straight track speed, like Olympic speed. I think he was setting records in high school for track. So, I mean, he is different when it comes to, that top flight speed. And you don't have a whole lot of running backs like that. He reminds me a lot of like a Chris Johnson. And he does kind of compare pretty well to Jahmyr Gibbs, not quite the pass catching prowess as Jahmyr does. I'll give him that. But the thing that I was really surprised about is you look at him, 5'8", 188 pounds, like he's just a speed only kind of guy. And that is not the case. He actually has like a surprising amount of power. And I like his ability to run between the tackles better than Jahmyr Gibbs. For someone of his size, it is really impressive. He's doing it in the SEC too. So it's not like he's just going against some jokes of schools where he can just do whatever he wants. But he's been a solid contributor ever since his freshman year. He's got good vision, good patience. The elusiveness is also there to complement the speed. And I think that he's very well-rounded, still like a solid pass catcher. He runs really good routes. And then I also read, and you might want to fact check me on this, but only 2 fumbles in 3 years. So ball security is going to keep him on the field. I think that he's just a solid, well-rounded running back. And, until I really turned on the tape and saw that power for myself, like I wouldn't have believed it, but you watch him run through guys, like he's not getting taken down by arm tackles. Sure, like if you're a big linebacker, like you're going to bring him down if you get a solid hit on the guy, but you better not miss because he can juke you out. And if he gets around that edge, he is gone. He's even faster than Jahmyr Gibbs. So I love the prospect. He's definitely in that second tier running backs that I was mentioning, along with Jahmyr Gibbs and one other guy. And I just love him as a prospect. I think that he's very slept on in a lot of circles in fantasy football.
So I do agree that when you look at the measurables and you look at the speed in general, I thought he would be bouncing runs to the outside a lot more. Now, I don't think we'll get to this guy later on, but Keaton Mitchell out of East Carolina, he's got a similar speed, and all he does is run to the outside and try to
Mhm.
use his speed. A-Chain doesn't do that, and I'll give him credit for that. He does, honestly, sometimes to his detriment. Like there's sometimes I think in the South Carolina game, like he was 1-on-1 on the edge, like just outside the tackle. He could have just ran to the sideline and he was away for
Mhm.
like a home run touchdown. But inside, I think it was on 3rd and 1, so he went inside and tried to get did get the first down. But sometimes he could have just used his speed to hit the home run, but he didn't. And I think he's got toughness because of that. I think that's a lot different than having the physical and the power running. I think I see it as toughness and he's willing to go inside. But I didn't see him like break a lot of tackles. Like I said, maybe arm tackles but that's like using his speed to break through arm tackles rather than like actual power. And when he gets to the NFL, everyone's going to be powerful. Everyone's going to be a little bit quicker. So he's maybe not going to have as many opportunities like that. Like if he can't juke someone in open field and use his speed, he's not going to be able to run through anyone at the next level, I don't think anyway. And yeah, and that's where his size and comes into concern for me. I also think like the way he was used is not how he's going to be used in the NFL if he's going to be
Mhm.
successful. Like you almost need to completely throw out this last year. I know in the first couple of years in college he was sharing time with Isaiah Spiller, but last year he was used as like a lead bell cow back. He's not going to be successful in the NFL doing that whatsoever. He's going to need to be a satellite back. You're going to need to get him in open space, whether that's like toss plays or catching out the backfield, and get him to run and use his speed. So we've mentioned the Dolphins as a situation before. That's like an ideal situation for him. He's in space. He can run, use his 4.3 speed, and that would be
Mhm.
great. But whoever drafts him is going to have a plan for him. And I worry that whoever drafts him isn't going to use him like that. And he's almost like a big projection because what we've seen in college isn't going to translate to the NFL. So he needs to rework his game. And that's what I don't like about him. Like I'd rather have other guys over him because of that reason. And he does still have the elite traits, but you need to be able to mold that.
So I do agree with a lot of things that you said there. Like I don't see him as an immediate 3-down running back because he was used that way this last year as, first, second, third down kind of guy. He can do it all. But the difference between him and Jahmyr Gibbs is Jahmyr Gibbs is a better pass catching running back. And I think that Devon Achane is a better running back because of that in between the tackles ability. And you said like if he is out in space and if he can't make a guy miss, he's going to go down pretty easily. But that's pretty much the same for any running back. Like a Jahmyr Gibbs, like if he's out in space and if he can't make a guy miss, he's going down just as easily. And I would take Devon Achane over Jahmyr Gibbs to break that one tackle in open field and then boom, send it to the house. Because if he makes one guy miss out in open field, he can bring it to the house any given play. And I just love his in between the tackles ability a little bit more. And that's why I kind of give the nod. I go back and forth between the two. They are so, so close to me. And I've gone back and forth a couple of times on where they rank in this class. But a lot of my concerns are about the same as Jahmyr Gibbs. Like, he's not going to see that goal line work really. And it is landing spot dependent. It's kind of unclear how both of those guys' games is going to translate over to the NFL. He did also miss a couple of games with a foot injury this year. So, I mean, that's something to keep an eye out on, but he's never had like significant injury history. The reason why I like him so much is because Jahmyr Gibbs is, that in like a non-super flex league, he's going like second or third overall, where Devon Achane, you might be able to get him at the top of the second round, depending on who you're drafting with. So that's why he's a better value than Jahmyr Gibbs. Like if I had the number 2 pick and the 12th pick in the first round, I'd be taking Jackson Smith-Njigba and Jahmyr Gibbs. Or would you rather have like a Jahmyr Gibbs and maybe like Jalen Hyatt, Like that is a huge difference for me because I don't think there's much of a difference between Achane and Gibbs. And then if you could get a Njigba at the beginning and then wait till the latter half of the first round to snag a Devon Achane, that is a good get in the first round. 2 solid contributors for your fantasy team.
Yeah, I was watching and I like this guy a lot. I think that it's funny for his size though, like that he does hit the inside hole so hard. You know, you wouldn't expect that, right? You'd think he'd be a guy who'd want to be outside, but he does a lot of that. He does a lot of the work that you'd think a 220-pound back would do.
Yeah.
And but his like speed is amazing, and he's a fantastic runner. I'm just kind of sitting here watching you guys fight it back and forth, and just agreeing with mostly what Corbin says. And the only thing is, I don't know if like it was a picture problem or what, but when I was looking him up, this guy could be an identical twin to Deshaun Watson. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but God, like, I don't know if they
Probably
screwed up
bad.
or what. Like, God, he looked almost exactly like him. It was crazy. And that's all I got to say about him, because you guys have said it all. So
One last thing that I will say about him is I love his aggressiveness, because there's guys in this class that just have natural power and physicality, but with Devon Achane, like he has that dog in him, and he will like launch into a guy. Like he wants to punish people. He might not be the biggest guy. He might not be able to hit the hardest, but he will try to run through somebody when he is in between the tackles. Like if he has a yard to go, he will try his best, as much as he physically can to make something happen. It might not always work for him, but at least it shows that he has that grit and that mentality. That's another thing that you don't really, test for. You have to watch the tape to see how these guys actually play football. And when go ahead.
Yeah, with that, you got to wonder about the size, and if he takes that to the NFL, how long is he going to last, right?
Well, I mean, most running backs, you're not going to get any more than 5 years out of them, best case, unless you're like, a Bijan type. And then there's always injury concerns with running backs too. So when it comes to running backs, I look at guys who have elite traits, and he has elite speed. And I also like his mentality a lot, because I think that, he might not be the most powerful physical running back, but he tries to be. And I like that a lot. He knows that it's kind of a weakness of his game. And so he tries to make a point on punishing people for trying to underestimate him due to his size.
It's fantastic. I'm so happy that he can think that he can run through defenders at the NFL level, but he absolutely cannot. And I can't wait to see Jahmyr Gibbs like absolutely destroy him. I honestly, I could not disagree more. Like Gibbs is so far and away better than Achane for me. And yeah, I think we've talked enough about it already, but I just
All right, I'll rake in that value, man. Like let him fall to me. I will take him every single time.
I understand what you're saying about the value and the difference, and you have them a lot closer, so you're willing to bet on the value. But in terms of not to go too much back on the Gibbs chatter, but in terms of taking Gibbs at 102, I think running backs are valued more than wide receivers, and you can maybe get a wide receiver in the second round, although I would not pick Jalen Hyatt. Like you
It's
look
just
in
an
previous,
example,
yeah, I know. Previous years, like you could maybe get Jahan Dotson or Christian Watson, maybe, and they seem to be looking all right. But yeah, that's maybe a
Did you just say you might get a? Did you just say you might get a white receiver in the second round?
No, I said a Jahan Dotson and a Christian Watson.
They could be white.
I don't see color. It's just
Good man, Tyler. All right, let's move on from Devon Achane before we tear each other's heads off here. Hopefully that value will fall to me. Good to know. Keep that in the back of the noggin here. But let's talk about our last top 5 prospect of the day, and that is Zach Charbonnet out of UCLA. He's 22 years old, so a little bit older. All these guys have been 21 so far, but he's 22, senior coming out, transfer from University of Michigan. I remember watching him play there. But he is 6 foot tall, 214 pounds, pretty athletic guy too. He had an 8.71 RAS score with a 4.53 40. He has elite explosion, but poor agility testing. Last year, he had 195 carries for 1,359 yards and 14 touchdowns. He also had 37 catches for 321 yards and 0 touchdowns. And the year before, 2021, he had 203 carries for 1,137 yards and 13 touchdowns. Also had the 24 catches to go with that, with 197 yards and 0 touchdowns. So Zach Charbonnet has been a guy that's been on my radar for a little while now. He was, speculated to come out in last year in the draft, but he returned for one more year, put together a very solid season. And he's another guy who could project as a 3-down back potentially. So I like this guy a lot. There's some pros and cons for sure, but what are your thoughts?
I would like to say that I really like this guy. He's like power back, great speed and agility. Reading the wrong thing. Anyway, he's 3-down back, like you said. My notes say I like he. He runs with speed, power, and just for being such a bigger back, like he's so smooth when he cuts. It's like cutting butter, whatever the saying is. Just yeah, I'm a big fan because I like he.
Are you a fan of the fact that he's an upright runner also?
Well, I did read that he is, but not. He's not like Bigsby, because he's not like all the time upright runner. This guy sometimes can, like the scout. It said sometimes can find himself as an upright runner, but
The same scout as the Dalton Kincaid take, right?
on site, bitch, on site.
So you like
I-
everything
not-
about him. No
not
negatives
just
against him.
Oh, but he can lower the pads.
Yeah, he can lower the pads. He has a power back. He's got a thick build as well, and you don't see a lot of that in this class. I know we've talked about a couple guys, but most of the guys, once you get past this top 5, are like smaller and like maybe not as thick. He runs with power, but to me he is difficult to take down. But I think he was running through big lanes at UCLA, and like when he got to the second level and he was building up speed, that's when you couldn't take him down. I worry about his lateral agility and his quickness. And I think that was seen in the combine measurements as well. I think his 40 time was decent, but his lateral agility stuff wasn't quite as good, and that shows on tape. So I wonder if he goes to the NFL and he's getting hit closer to the backfield, does he have the power then to shrug off defenders and carry on? So I think he does have a lot of production, and he was productive as a freshman as well, which seems to translate well for fantasy success. But I just don't know why I don't really like him. Like he's a jack of all trades, master of none to me.
Mhm.
Like he is a decent catcher. He's got soft hands, but I don't think that translates to being a threat. Like he's a 2-down back who can catch the ball. And I just think he's very replaceable. And
Mhm.
when you see where he's projected to go in the NFL draft, which is like maybe late second, early third, just no thanks. Like give me a day 3 back who can do similar things. And then when you're looking at fantasy drafts, like late first, early second, nah, that's not for me. Like I think he's quite replaceable because he doesn't have like any elite traits.
Yeah. I 100% agree with you on that. Just kind of like very solid running back overall at just about everything, but not, he doesn't have that elite speed or that elite power, that elite elusiveness. He is a solid receiver. So I do think he has that 3-down back potential, but agreed, he's most likely going to be more like a 2-down kind of guy. I heard somebody comp him to James Conner, and that really resonated with me because James Conner does have the ability to catch out of the backfield, especially with the Cardinals these past few years. And he is a solid runner, a guy who could get 20 carries. So if he could be a James Conner type, that warrants, mid first, early second draft capital in fantasy drafts, that is. So, I mean, he's rumored to go like second or third round in the NFL draft, and he is in that second tier running backs for me, along with Jahmyr Gibbs and Devon Achane. But the thing that really bothered me with him is I think that he has that natural power for somebody of his size, 215 pounds. I think he kind of slimmed down as well for the combine just to run like a faster 40. So he might actually be a little slower in reality. But how I mentioned like Devon Achane and Tank Bigsby, and like there's some other guys in this class that will try to like rip your head off and run right through you. You don't see him doing that. Like, he is a powerful runner. Don't get me wrong. That's probably, his biggest calling card as a running back. But he'll finish those plays, but you don't see him want to like punish people and just hit him as hard as he can. He's more content with just making contact and getting a couple extra yards. And so that's something like when you're like used in that role, you want to be able to punish these defenders and loosen up that defense a little bit. So like, sorry to bring it back to the Lions, but that's how we use like Jamal Williams. We wanted somebody to run through motherfuckers so that DeAndre Swift could kind of bounce it outside and have that explosive play. So you want to see him run with a little bit more power. I think that, you know, there's a little bit more that he could do in that department. Yeah, I think that he is a little bit of a higher floor kind of prospect, but a lower ceiling. And I've kind of gone back and forth with him. The other thing that I forgot to mention too is how I really liked how you said about all the lanes that he had. They were huge because he had a great offensive line, great blocking scheme. And depending on where he goes, he might not have that in the NFL, you know? So
Playing
I
in the
like him a
Pac-12
lot.
as well, and they
Yeah.
don't tend to have good running backs come into the NFL, and I think it's the style of like defense that they play as well. So it's interesting that he went from Michigan, who is like the typical like
Big
power
10 defenses.
running Big Ten defenses, and then he goes to UCLA and absolutely dominates. So that's another little bit of concern I have.
Yep. No, I'm with you there. I mean, I like him overall, and he's been a solid prospect. He has the production to go along with it, but there's nothing that really, you know, made my eyes pop out. Like with Jahmyr Gibbs, you have that pass catching ability. With Devon Achane, you have that speed and in between the tackles ability. But with Zach Charbonnet, it's more like oh, that's good, that's good, that's good. But there's nothing that's like, holy shit, like he is elite at this, you know? So that's the
Very
one thing
landing
that kind
spot
of,
dependent.
yeah. Because if he could carve out a James Conner role and he's like a fringe RB1 every single year, I mean, that's value right there. But I think there's other guys who you could see potentially panning out to have an RB1 season. With him, I see him kind of being like, you know, a top 10 kind of guy every now and then, maybe top 15 the next year kind of deal. So still, that's valuable in fantasy football. And he absolutely should be going like no later than middle of the second round. I mean, this is like for roster wars. I mean, we'll see how like defenses shake out because it's tough to say where people are going to start taking defense over offense. And, you know, obviously in other leagues, I'm more scouting just for offense and doing mock drafts for that. So I know that he's going to be going like middle of the first round in like a super flex or like non PPR kind of draft. Anything else on Charbonnet, or should we just jump into these rankings?
Rank it.
All right, Tyler, I'm interested to hear yours first. Who do you got, 1 through 5?
Well, it was close. I did a lot of took a lot of meditation on this one and thinking on the, you know. But I'm gonna go with Bijan for 1.
Bijan.
Huh?
Bijan.
Bijan.
Yeah, Bijan. That's it.
Bijan. So Bijan first. I'm gonna go with Charbonnet, my number 2.
Damn.
And then it was close between, but I'm gonna go with Gibbs for 3 and Achu for 4. I know it's a chain, but Achu. Every time I see it, I say Achu. And then yeah, Tank is 5. If I had somebody else to put in there, I would have put him ahead of Tank.
Yep.
So Tank just gets 5 because he's the last on the list.
Yep. Just between these 5, I agree with you. I wouldn't even have Tank top 5. He's, you know, like I said, in that top 3, but there's another guy that I put right up there too. But let's get into that with our sleepers here. Ross, how are your rankings? Gibbs 1, Bijan 2, and then what?
Gibbs 1, Bijan Robinson, small tier break. Jahmyr Gibbs, big tier break.
Big.
And I've got Tank. Yeah, big tier break. I've got Tank Bigsby next. I like Tank. Just out of these 5 guys, I like Tank. And then I've got Charbonnet, who is quite milk toast. I don't really have anything good to say about him. And then Devon Achane, who, like I said, he's got elite traits. So his ceiling is not sky high, but it can be higher. But his floor, I think, is very low for me. So number 5.
Okay. All right. It's acceptable, I suppose. I might not like it, but I'll swallow it. For me, I'm going Bijan number 1. Big surprise there. Gibbs is number 2 for me. And I keep going back and forth between Charbonnet and A-Chain here, but I think I'm going to take Charbonnet 3 just because I do think he has that 3-down potential. He is a solid pass catcher, and I do like that power a little bit more. I would not be surprised at all if A-Chain is the better running back overall, if he has that number 2 in the class. But I'm going to put Charbonnet at 3 and A-Chain at 4. Very, very close between Gibbs, Charbonnet, and A-Chain. I think they're very interchangeable, and I think that A-Chain has the best value because there's not much of a fall off, in my opinion, between those 3. And then I will have Tank in 5th just because I don't think he's going to be utilized as a pass catcher, and he doesn't have that real elusiveness to take it to the house. He's going to be a solid guy, but depending on where he goes, he could rise up if he can get some goal line work. But I think that's how he's going to be utilized in the NFL, just that short yardage specialist kind of guy. And maybe he falls in for a touchdown or 2 every now and then, but I don't see him getting, 20 carries or something like that with 5 catches on top. I wouldn't be surprised. It just depends on where he goes, and, I say all this now, but I really do like these guys. This is a very, very good and deep running back class. Obviously, we keep saying it, landing spots didn't going to dictate a lot, but I'm really kind of nitpicking with these guys because I think it's one of the better running back classes that we've had in recent years. So
Yeah, draft
then there's
capital is
guys.
big to me as well. Like if a guy goes in the 3rd round rather than the 4th, 5th round, I'm going to take him. And like you said, like a lot of these guys are in the same tier for me, so they're interchangeable. So if someone goes to a slightly better a landing spot, gets taken a round earlier, my rankings are going to change massively. That's why I don't mind sharing it with you guys who are going to pick everyone in front of me. But yeah, things are going to change.
Yeah, it could all switch up. Like, I mean, I could have Jahmyr Gibbs not even really close to on my board, depending on where he goes, in some situations. That's a joke, but there's a lot of guys in this class that we haven't even talked about yet, which is why with these sleepers, like there's so many different guys that could be on this list. So I'm interested to see who you guys have here because the guy I'm going to talk about, I would put him in the top 5 for me. But let's start it off with Tyler. Who's your sleeper?
Running back out of Kentucky, Chris Rodriguez Jr. Really like this guy. Power back, good speed, agility. He punishes the defenders. He's not afraid of contact at all. He's going to be he'll be like a short yardage type guy is where he's going to excel in this game. But his biggest problem was he had a DUI, so there's some off-field issues there. I didn't read about his character much. But I mean, if you're drinking and driving, you got an issue. So he did run behind a poor offensive line in last year. So stats weren't there. I did not record his stats, so I don't know them. But yeah, I really like him. I think that with some work, he could be a starter or a backup. But if with some work, he could be a starter in the NFL.
The problem that I
have, he's more of an old school back,
Yeah, definitely old school. The problem that I have with him is he's not going to be a pass catcher at all. Like I haven't dug in super deep on him or some of these like super late round guys, but I mean, he is like, a very late round pick for me because there's some guys who have potential in the passing game and he just doesn't really have that. Let me see if I can. Yeah, he had 5 catches last year and 13 the year before. So in the last 2 years, he has had 18 catches total in his career. He's had 20 catches. Most of these guys get that in one season. So when it comes to fantasy football, I want to see guys who can catch some passes. That's one of the most important attributes a running back can have for me for fantasy football.
Well,
yeah, I think he's a day 3 guy who could be a 2-down back, like you said. He breaks a decent number of tackles, and like you said, Tyler, I think same as Will Levis. Like he didn't really have a great offensive line, like at all, so almost didn't have a chance. But he did break a decent number of tackles as a 2-down back.
Yeah, who's your guys' sleepers, Kyle? Let me shit on them. Come on, let's go.
Go ahead, Ross.
My sleeper is a guy called Roschon Johnson. He's a backup running back at Texas, so he's behind Bijan. He was like a 4-star recruit, and he played quarterback in high school, but then he came to Texas and was a running back, and his best usage came as like a true freshman. So that was before Bijan got there. He had 123 carries, 23 catches, and eight TDs. And I'll give you a few names, a few NFL players: Damian Pierce, Ramondre Stevenson, Alvin Kamara, Josh Jacobs, and Tony Pollard. Every single one of these guys has a top 10 roster war season, and none of them had a single season with more rushing attempts than Roschon Johnson's true freshman season. So the sample size for Johnson is really low because he only had like 93 rushing attempts last year. And we are fudging the numbers a bit because Kamara and Pollard were big receiving threats, and I don't think Johnson's quite the same. But he is a power back. He's like 219 pounds, and he is all about breaking tackles. His yards after contact were like really good, and again, small sample size, but it was 4.28 yards after contact. It's better than Bijan, who was 4.17, Tank Bigsby 4.16, and Charbonnet was 4.15. So that's like the profile he's going to fit in the NFL. And I think I'm not going to go too crazy. I know a lot of guys have him as like top 5 in the running back rankings.
Mhm.
That's just like obscene to me. That's just like the big back coalition is just looking at sorting by weight and then making the rankings. But I think he could be a good contributor in the NFL. He could be a really good special teams player. So he'll hang around, and then he might get an opportunity to be like a goal line back, a power back for the first 2 downs, and he could have some sort of residual fantasy value.
Yeah. Roschon definitely overshadowed Bijan, but I think NFL circles and, fantasy footballers like ourselves have all caught on that, he's not chopped liver. Obviously not a ton of opportunity with Bijan there, but he can run, he can catch. Given the opportunity, I mean, he's an interesting prospect for sure. I like him. The one thing is that he did break his hand at the Senior Bowl. So I haven't even looked up on how that's going really, but that's something to monitor at least for his rookie year. But yeah, just depends on landing spot and opportunity with him on an NFL team. But for me, I'm going with Tyjae Spears, the true Senior Bowl standout from Tulane. He's 5'10", 201 pounds, pretty, above average athlete, 7.51 RAS score. And he's got the stats to go along with it. Last year, almost 1,600 yards and 19 touchdowns. He can run, he can catch. And the one thing that caught my eye with him is, coming from a smaller school, you aren't getting that national spotlight. But when he was given that spotlight, he has stepped up in big situations like the Senior Bowl, for example. Like you can look up his touchdown run. I think it was in practice. You see that elusiveness there. It's on full display. And then also he had his best game of the year, excuse me, in his bowl game against USC. He had 17 carries for 205 yards and 4 touchdowns against USC. Now, I know it's a Pac-12 defense, but it's also Tulane. So, I mean, he did have a fumble that game. That is a concern, but I think he only had like 2 career fumbles or something like that. So he is going to hold on to the ball. He's not going to, get put in the doghouse or something like that. Fumble shouldn't be an issue, but he had 6.8 yards per carry through 33 college games. And the one thing that's elite about him, and he might be the best in the class at this, is his elusiveness. He just has a rare knack for just making guys miss. It's just crazy natural vision and patience with it. And he can just cut on a dime. Like he didn't have like crazy agility numbers at the combine number. It was pretty average actually. But when you turn on the tape, it is insane. I don't know how he does it and I can't really describe it, but he almost never gets taken down by that first tackler. He's going to make somebody miss every single play. And then boom, he could be gone. He ran a 4.5, 4.40. So not super crazy fast or anything like that, but he didn't have any good blocking in college and he could still make something happen. And I don't have the numbers in front of me, but his yards after contact, I think it was like 4 point something yards after contact. So it's crazy. 4.55. Okay, exactly. So, I mean, even if he's getting hit, he is going to be able to make something happen, or at least for almost 5 yards in college, and then I don't have like he was contacted behind the line of scrimmage and he is still making something happen. He's not getting brought down for a loss. So I just think that he could carve out a role on any NFL team. And I like him a lot because it doesn't really matter what team he goes to. I think that he is going to find a role in the NFL. Very well-rounded in terms of power, speed, elusiveness, receiving. He's got it all. This is a guy who reminds me a lot of Alvin Kamara. And, obviously Kamara wasn't a high recruit or a prospect coming into the NFL draft, but he lands on a team with Sean Payton and he knew exactly how to use him. So if he lands on the right team, he could be a guy that is a solid top 5 fantasy football contributor for 5, 6, 7 years, maybe. That's something I can't really say about a lot of these guys. Some knocks against him. I mean, not in the most competitive conference. Obviously, there's teams like Cincinnati, but still, he wasn't going against the best competition. He doesn't have that crazy speed that some of these guys have, but overall, he's very, very solid at pretty much everything, but that elusiveness is off the charts. One of the best in this class. He's a great in between the tackles runner, and I really, really love Tyjae Spears.
My comp for him is James Harden. He's got he's very aggressive and fast, and then he stops on a dime, and it's just unbelievable. Like, and I think you're right. He was a standout at the Senior Bowl, and there's that one clip that was shared everywhere when he was like on a pass on a pass route, and then he just stops, ducks like under the defender, completely sells him, and then he goes away. And it's funny because that USC game that you talked about as well, he done the exact same thing, like in a real NFL game. Like he catches a pass in the flat, near the sideline, stops completely. The defender flies over him, and then he like runs down the sideline, accelerating for a touchdown. You need to look it up. Like, it's unbelievable, and that just sort of encapsulates everything about Tyjae Spears, everything that I love about him. The one concern is for me draft capital, and I want to see where he goes because he did have like an ACL injury. It was in 2020. It was a while ago, but it was a bad one. I think he tore his meniscus at the same time as well. So I wonder if there's any medical issues there and if he drops down NFL draft board. So we'll see. But he's one of the guys who's in my top 5 that we didn't talk about. Really like him.
Same. Yep, he's right up there for me. I'm probably even slipping into that tier 2, honestly. The more and more I look into him, and I've obviously started to scout like other position groups since we started doing this podcast. But months ago, before we started this process, he was like, holy shit. Like, once the Senior Bowl happened, that's what really put him on my radar. And I was able to dig into him a little bit more, and I've fallen in love. So yeah, Tyjae Spears.
I like Spears. I would have had him in their top 5. I would have taken Tank out.
Yeah.
The only thing Tank has on him is he's better looking and he gets more ladies. So
I don't know what any of
that
these guys look like
directly-
with their helmets off. I need to start doing that. It's a big part of your evaluation, Tyler.
That is a big part because obviously, your level of attractiveness corresponds with your fantasy football success. So
exactly.
that's something to keep on your radar for next year. But let's wrap it up with that, guys. Clap it up. That was a hell of a couple of weeks getting through this entire class. Well done, you guys. Great evaluation. I hope you loved it, Roster Wars. We will be taking about a year hiatus from this podcast, but I had fun with it. I'm ready to do it next year. It was a great time. Yeah, I think we learned a lot and we have a good thing going here. RFA is kind of wrapping up, at least for us and rising rookies. It'll probably take, the promising prospects another month or 2 to get through. And then hopefully we can start up this rookie draft and hit the ground running.
The rookie draft will be delayed this year because the PP there can't get their shit together.
Yeah, I know. So we'll just wait patiently for them, twiddle our thumbs until we can finally draft some of these rookies and build for the 2023 season. But it's been a fun couple of weeks talking with you guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Yeah, stick around for next year and we will be back.
Bye, guys.
Later.